listening to Philly Who, the podcast that tells the stories of the doers, thinkers, and performers of Philadelphia. And you might want to grab a Kleenex for this one. This episode tells the story of a 4-year-old who held a lemonade stand, but she didn't want to buy toys with the money that she raised. She wanted to donate it to fight childhood cancer because she herself was fighting childhood cancer. That girl's name was Alex Scott, and today I'm talking to her mother, Liz, who, like any of us, was pretty surprised when her 4-year-old daughter took it upon herself to fund cancer treatment.
So I said, "What do you want to buy so badly?" And she said, "I'm not keeping the money, I'm giving it to my doctors so they can help kids the way they help me."
You'll hear how that one lemonade stand started a movement and led Alex to set a goal for herself to raise $1 million.
So we said, "Alex, how are you going to raise $1 million?" And she said, "If everybody has lemonade stands, I think we can do it."
You'll also hear what it was like for a mother to watch her child become a national phenomenon, all while her health declined.
I thought as a parent, I should not be letting her do this. It just didn't feel like the right thing to do because she was so sick even to travel to New York. But she said this is important.
And we'll talk about how Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation has grown into the $150 million nonprofit it is today, and how Philadelphia has played a part in realizing Alex's vision.
Philadelphia just took our family in, took Alex in, took her cause in. You know, we belong here. This is our home.
All this and more with Liz Scott coming up on Philly Who. I'm your host, Kevin Schmidlin, and thanks for tuning in. And again, grab those tissues. So many of you have probably heard of Alex's Lemonade Stand. They're very active, especially in the Philadelphia area, and they raise a ton of money every year for the research for, treatment of, and transportation to the treatment of childhood cancer for different families across the country. But not too many people know the origin story. It all started with Alex Scott when she was 4 years old and decided to hold a lemonade stand to give the money to her doctors to help other kids like her with cancer. But, of course, Alex's story begins with Jay and Liz, her parents. Jay and Liz were high school sweethearts who wound up going to the University of Connecticut together, and they actually got a head start on Alex in selling beverages. But at first, it wasn't lemonade. It was actually coffee.
Yeah, so we had the coffee shop. It was called the Java Joint. It was such a cool business. I would do that again.
Yeah?
It was awesome. It's a lot more competition now, though. We only sold coffee. We didn't sell food. People would wait in line, 20 people deep, to get this. And my husband has such a great memory that he would know, like 4, 5, 6 people back, what was coming. Wow. So once they got up, they knew they would have their drink.
Just be ready.
Ready, yeah. So when Alex was not quite 1 year old, so our older son was 2 and she was almost 1, she was diagnosed with neuroblastoma. And I mean, as anybody would say, who's had a child diagnosed with cancer or any, life-threatening disease, our whole entire life just turned upside down from that point on, in, pretty significant ways.
So at what point did the family relocate from Connecticut to Philadelphia?
So she when your child is diagnosed with cancer, there's a protocol, hopefully, meaning there's a roadmap to a cure for them. She immediately went into the chemotherapies that they thought would cure her, and they would work for a little bit and they would stop working. So this went on for 3 years. She had 6 major surgeries to remove these tumors that were threatening her. She had months and months of chemotherapy. She had radiation therapy. After 3 years of all that, not only was it continuing to persist, but it had metastasized to her bones. So now she was having pain from it being in her bones, and her prognosis literally went to almost 0% chance of surviving at that point. So we were living in West Hartford, Connecticut. We had traveled to Boston. We had traveled to New York over the years for second and third opinions from day one, really. And they had never exactly agreed on what the next step was. Now they all said, take her home, give her time away from the hospital, enjoy her last days that she has. So we were devastated. On the other hand, she had just learned how to walk, stand up on her own and walk. She, other than the pain, had a good life. So when she was feeling good, she was playful, she was happy. It just didn't seem like it was time to stop treating her. I didn't feel that we had tried enough. And we ended up contacting the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, her doctor there, Dr. John Maris, because another doctor had told us, you might want to talk to him. He's got some new things going on there. And he recommended a experimental treatment for her. And he was honest with us in terms of saying, I'm not going to tell you I can cure her, but I think I can give her more time. I think I can relieve her pain, and I think she can have some quality of life. So that's really why we started coming to Philadelphia, for that hope to just make her feel better. And in the back of your mind, you think maybe this brand new treatment will be the thing.
It'll be the thing that cures her.
Yeah, exactly. So we came to Philadelphia for the first time in 1999, the end of 99. She was almost 4 years old. So we got to the Children's Hospital. She was admitted. And this treatment, they still do it. She was actually the second child to receive it.
And they're still doing it today.
Wow. It's pretty standard. It's called MIBG therapy. And it's a radioactive iodine that targets neuroblastoma, eats it up. So it's a targeted therapy, which back then was much more unusual than it is now. But she was radioactive. So her body was processing this radiation and she was emitting radiation. So she had to essentially be in a lead-lined room. We weren't allowed to spend a whole lot of time in there with her. So you would think she would come out a bit traumatized. But she came out all smiles 3 days after she went in. And she said, that treatment worked. I feel better. Let's go shopping for a Christmas dress. So that's where that emotion came in, because we went down wondering if we were doing the right thing, thinking, should we just be letting her be home? Because it's pretty traumatic going to a new hospital, and this treatment was pretty traumatic. But to hear her say that worked was just amazing.
You must have felt jubilant.
Yeah, we drove home feeling a completely different mindset and just so full of hope that there was more to be done, and just happy that she wasn't in pain anymore. And that really led us down the road of 4.5 years of experimental treatments. 3 years of that were the best years she had, because some of them really worked well for her. And it planted the idea in her mind, I think, because of the timing of it, that there was more to be done to help find a cure.
Right. So is that when she started bugging you to have a lemonade stand?
She did. So about a month later, so January, she had just turned 4, and we were coordinating our care between our amazing doctor in Connecticut and Dr. Maris here in Philadelphia. And we would travel every couple months, but they were able to coordinate that for us. So we were still living there. And she talked about having a lemonade stand in January, and it was Connecticut in January, so it's even colder than Philadelphia. And I told her, when you feel better, when it gets warmer. We had another younger son at the time, so we were really busy with the three kids, the 2 boys and Alex. And she ended up talking about the lemonade stand for months. Every few weeks, she would ask about it. And then finally in June of 2000, so she's 4.5 now, she said, we still haven't had my lemonade stand, and it's hot out, because my excuse had been it's not warm enough. So I said, what do you want to buy so badly? And she said, I'm not keeping the money. I'm giving it to my doctor so they can help kids the way they help me. And that was really how it started.
So you went and bought some lemonade.
We did not buy enough lemonade. So I told her she would probably raise $5 or $10. And she said, I don't care. I'll do it anyways. I called my sister, who has 4 children at the time, and said, why don't you come by? She's having a lemonade stand. It'll be fun. And as we were hanging up, I said, oh, by the way, she's not keeping the money. She's giving it to her hospital. And she said, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? I said, no, isn't that cute? Isn't that funny? And she said, I'm going to call the newspaper. And I said, I thought that was funny. I said, it's a lemonade stand. You're going to call the newspaper? I don't think they're going to care. And she said, oh, they're going to care. So she called the Hartford Courant, and they did a little preview article about the little girl with cancer having a lemonade stand to raise money. And people responded from day one. She raised $2,000 that day. So my husband was on lemonade duty, and he was literally running back and forth to the store getting lemonade all day long. Wow.
And so is that when you decided that this would be a regular thing, or did you think it would be one and done?
We absolutely thought it would be one and done. So, that day was so special. She, here we thought it would mostly be family and some neighborhood friends who would come by. And they did. But there were strangers who came by. I don't know from how far away. With some people were smiling, some people were crying. There was a gentleman who came by, an older gentleman. He gave her a card and he just walked away. He had tears in his eyes. And the card said, "Your parents must be so proud." And it was signed anonymous, and there was a $100 bill in it.
Wow.
And another gentleman came by, all smiles with a big bucket of change. And he said, "I've been saving this change for 17 years, and I didn't know why. And I read that article this morning, and now I know why." And it was amazing just to see how wonderful people are. And it's like it, but to see it that way and to see total strangers make such an effort to come out and support what she was doing really changed our lives. And at the end of the day, I said, "Alex, what did you think about the lemonade stand?" Because she had been waiting so long to have it. And she said, "That was the best thing that ever happened to me." And I knew then that this wasn't cute. This meant something, and this was important to her. And I was embarrassed for myself that I was almost sort of mocking the fact that she thought this was going to be something special. But we did think that was it. It was $2,000 that she had done her part.
Which is phenomenal.
It's phenomenal. That would have been amazing in and of itself. But we ended up moving to Philadelphia, which, believe it or not, is not that unusual for a family like ours whose child has relapsed and needs options to relocate to be closer to a facility that can provide them with those options just for that hope of a longer life or potentially a cure. So we moved to Philadelphia. It was just too hard going back and forth. We also had more options if we were going to be here more often. And she brought her stand to Philly, which was not in our plan, but she thought it would make sense, I guess, to keep doing it every year.
So how soon until round 2?
So the next year, when, the next spring, it was now, 2002, I guess. Yeah, 2002. She started asking real early about having the stand because she did not want to wait until it was too cold. So she set up in our front yard in June of 2002. And that was the stand that really just went to another level, I guess you would say. It was amazing. Similar to what happened in Connecticut, I told a friend at the time, she was more of an acquaintance that I knew through karate class. The moms sit there and chat with each other. And I told her, "You should come by. Alex is having a stand. She's done this before." And she was just blown away. And I say acquaintance at the time because she's such a good friend to me through the years. But she called the Philadelphia Inquirer. And they ran a full-page color ad in the old Philadelphia Inquirer section, the Sunday section, and 2 weeks before her stand. By the time she even opened her stand, she had raised $2,000. People were mailing money to her, dropping things off. And she set up in our front yard, all in. By the end of the day, she had raised over $12,000 in our front yard.
Wow.
It was
one day.
Amazing. Yeah. And people just came from all around. And what happened was pre-social media, it went viral, if that makes sense. So not quite as viral as it went a couple of years later, but in the Philly area, all the news stations showed up. And then those little stories were getting picked up in other markets. So she started to get letters from all over the country, here and there, from people donating. But the amazing thing that happened was other kids heard what she did. Their parents told them, their grandparents told them, and they decided to have a lemonade stand. And they sent the money to her as well. So they were inspired by her and thought, "I can do that too," which I think was really the genius in what she created, the idea that anybody, even a 4-year-old, can be a part of curing this disease. And that really impressed her, those first letters from other kids who had lemonade stands.
Yeah, what did she say or how did she react when
She
they came through?
She was kind of quiet in a lot of ways. She was stubborn, and when she wanted something, she made it clear. But, she had this graceful way of expressing her pleasure with things. And she just had a big smile on her face, like a genuine deep down smile when she read those letters. So this went on to 2002. She had that stand. 2003, she had a stand in our front yard in the pouring rain. It rained from the morning until we went to bed at night. Not a little. It poured all day. She raised $18,000. People came and stayed. They just stood there with umbrellas. Some of the national news shows showed up, in our front yard that morning to cover this story. And she was sick at that point. So she had had a few good years on experimental treatments that got her down to like minimal disease, but they had stopped working. So now she was having a lot of problems from the cancer that was encroaching in different parts of her body. And she insisted on being treated. She really believed in it, but she was pretty sick. And that was really the beginning of her physical deterioration of that stand in 2003. But anyways, in the meantime, this thing is taking off. She's getting requests for interviews, and it's becoming more of a national story. So by the end of 2003, she had raised over $100,000 through the years with people helping and contributing. But she was really, really sick. And by the beginning of 2004, she was turning 8 in January, and we knew that this would be her last birthday. We weren't talking about the lemonade stand because she always had her stand in June. And June was a long way off with how sick she was. But she got on the phone with a reporter, and I was kind of listening in the other room because she didn't really like me listening. She didn't really like being interviewed. So she was kind of shy about it. But she got on the phone, and I heard her say, well, so far I've raised over $100,000. So this year I'm going to raise $1 million. And I couldn't believe it. And you'd think I would have been excited or proud, but I remember feeling sad because I didn't think she was going to raise $1 million. And I didn't want her to die feeling like that was a failure because she had already done so much. She had raised over $100,000, and it was the best thing that ever happened to her, she said. And I thought, now she's going to think that this wasn't a success because she didn't raise $1 million. So we said, Alex, how are you going to raise $1 million? And she said, if everybody has lemonade stands, I think we can do it. So who can argue with that?
Wow. That's incredible that somebody so young can both dream big, but also be practical about it. She says, this is the girl that was disappointed at a $700 lemonade stand,
so
but
true.
still says, no, we just need to,
come together,
get it together in small chunks, and we'll get there.
And she even, my husband sat down with her and said, he was really all in, like, we got to help her do this. I was all in, but I should mention we had another child at this point. So I had a baby, an infant, a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, and Alex, a very sick child. So I thought, yeah, I want this to happen, but I kind of felt like I've got nothing left to give, right? I'm not capable of making this happen. But my husband really dug in with her and said, how are we going to do this? And she said, well, if we have lemonade stands on the same day as my stand, if we have lemonade stands in every state, I think we can do it.
Alex said that.
Yeah. So he worked with his college roommate to get a website set up. And we had become part of the Philadelphia Foundation at that point, so they could handle the money and the receipting and all that stuff. It was a phenomenal partnership. They were really, really great to her. And anyways, so he set this idea up with her, and people could sign up and say, hey, I'll have a stand. And we got the word out. Again, no social media. I'm not even sure how we got the word out. To our friends and family, email, I suppose, word of mouth, traditional news outlets. And the crazy thing that happened was that interview that she did with that reporter where she said, I want to raise $1 million. That was a long lead magazine. That didn't even come out till after she died. Somehow that goal spread. We are not sure how. It's not like we were doing PR for this. And she started getting calls and requests for interviews. She ended up that year on the Today Show, the Oprah Show, the Associated Press did a huge article that went into hundreds of magazines, newspapers all over the world. So people were learning about this and deciding they wanted to be a part of it.
What was it like when you got the call requesting that she would be on Oprah?
It was typical Alex because she was in the hospital. She was very sick at this point. Now she was being treated, but it wasn't really helping. And She was having so many problems. I mean, it was in her lungs, it was in her liver, there was a tumor closing off her esophagus. She had no platelets. So she was a really sick kid. She was in the hospital. I don't even remember with what the problem was at the time. And my husband got the call on his cell phone. Don't know how they got our number. Still don't know how all this happened. And, asked about her coming on, but we needed to be there Wednesday. This was Monday. And he said, no, she can't do that. Hangs up the phone. She says, who was that? And he said, oh, it was a reporter, wanting to do a story. And because she didn't like being interviewed, he figured that would satisfy her. And she said, but who was it? And he said, well, it was the Oprah show. And she said, are you crazy? Do you have any idea how many people watch that show? So she wanted to go, and, we kind of negotiated and said, well, you know what, if Dr. Maris says you can go, you can go. So he came in, and I was there too at this point. And she talked to him, and he said, hey, if you want to go to Chicago, Alex, you need to go to Chicago. So we got her, tanked up with all her blood products, had the name of a doctor there in case something happened, headed off to Chicago, and she was on the Oprah show.
Wow.
She was very savvy. I have no idea. I don't even think I had watched the Oprah show with her, but she knew that this was important. And she would say that at other times. She was very sick when she went on the Today Show, but the sickest she had been. And we really, I thought as a parent, I should not be letting her do this. It just didn't feel like the right thing to do because she was so sick even to travel to New York. But she said, this is important.
Wow. So, yeah, I mean, that video, those videos are still on the internet today. And when you watch the interview of her on the Today Show, it's very clear that she is struggling to say a single word.
I know.
Yet it was her that insisted on being there.
Oh, yes. She insisted on being there. And in fact, she was having a terrible time with talking because of the tumor. And she had had radiation to stop it because obviously, having your windpipe close it's not something anybody would want for their child, even if she was going to pass anyway. So she was having a lot of pain and she really couldn't speak. And she hadn't really talked all morning, to the point where when we went to the Today Show, we said to them, listen, she's not doing well. I don't know if she can even talk and do this interview. So the interviewer went over to her at that point and said, had a conversation and came back shaking his head. And I said, what's going on? He said, oh, she's going on. She's going on the show. She insisted. She had this determination that she was going to let people know that they could help.
Do you know what she said to the interviewer?
Yes, but we didn't know at the time. So, we were outside on the plaza. And what happens is you've got a microphone. The whole family was there, except for the baby, except for little Joey, getting interviewed. And we all had an earpiece in. So we could hear, it was Matt Lauer doing the interview. We could hear him talking. We couldn't hear what she was saying. And she was sitting first. So we had no idea what she said. But we knew it was something profound because of the reaction of everybody and his reaction. And I had so many emails and, people saying, you have to watch the interview. And I got to tell you, when I watched it, I still have a hard time watching it. It was a really tough interview to watch because she was so sick and so determined at the same time. And so there were two things. He said, how are you going to raise $1 million? And she said, well, if everybody has lemonade stands, I think we can do it. Struggling to speak. And that became, an even bigger call to action. But then he said, will you do me a favor? Will you come back next year and show me the $1 million check? And she shrugged and looked down and said, hopefully. But I knew when I watched it that she knew she was going to raise $1 million, but she also knew she wasn't going to be there to come back. And in fact, he apologized to us after and said, as soon as I asked that question, I knew I shouldn't have asked it. But it was really tough. It's really tough for me to talk about it still. Yeah. To think of what her state of mind was at that point. She did not want to talk about her future. She did not want to talk about what was happening to her. She made that clear. But then for her to say that, in that moment was pretty intense.
So at that point, that interview airs nationally. Did you then think that she'd reach $1 million?
At this point, so the crazy thing was, so the Oprah show was taped in, like, say, the beginning of May. We were told it would air in the next 5 or 6 weeks or something. And then the Associated Press interviewed her, maybe I want to say like the end of May, beginning of June. In the meantime, we got a call from the Today Show, Friday to be on Monday or something like that. All three of these things ended up hitting the same day. It was like if we were a PR firm, it would have been perfectly orchestrated,
Wow.
but we weren't. The Oprah show happened to air the same day the Today Show was live and the Associated Press article hit.
And this was sheer coincidence. There was
Sheer
no
coincidence. So things, no coordination. Things exploded. I mean, they had already had momentum, but we couldn't, our home phone was ringing so much that by the time you would hang up, the voicemail would be full. I mean, it was crazy. So in the meantime, my husband had organized with volunteers from our school to pack boxes. And like, if everybody's going to be a part of this, let's send them a little box with bandanas and some posters and things that they can use for their stand. And so that was all happening. And that was like amazing to see how it was all coming together. But at the same time, she was very, very sick. And it was a really hard time. It was a really hard time.
So the momentum builds. People start having lemonade stands. Did she reach $1 million?
So she had her last stand in June, and there were stands all over the country. We still have that event that she created. It's called Lemonade Days. And by the middle of July, she had raised about $800,000 that we had received, which was amazing how fast that happened.
Incredible.
And I don't even think we had online giving at that point. So it was really all people sending it through the mail from their lemonade stands and just donating. Crazy, incredible thing that happened was Volvo Cars had been a supporter of hers in the front yard. She had been nominated for an award, and they fell in love with her story. They fell in love with her and just followed along. And we got a call from Volvo in the middle of July, someone representing the company, asking how she was doing. And I said, she's not doing well. And they said, how is she doing towards her goal? And I said, she's going to reach it. We knew she was going to reach it at this point, but she's not going to be here to see it, I don't think. And she said, you tell her that she's reached it. You tell her that we're taking her over.
Wow. And what went through your mind when you heard those words?
I couldn't believe it. I mean, that was over $200,000. So she was there. Alex was home. So I got off the phone and I told her, and, typical of Alex being, very gracious and humble, she had a huge smile and like clapped her hands once and kind of laid back down inside. And she also said, I believe my son Patrick asked her what her goal was now. And she said, like $1 bazillion or something. But you could tell she was really happy. She was happy that the goal had been met. She died 10 days later. So, I mean, it was clear afterwards that she was really holding on. So I'm so grateful for that gift of everybody who helped her reach that goal, because knowing her, she would have held on a lot longer until her goal was met, because that's the kind of person she was. And as much as we wanted her to hold on, it was so hard for her at that point that you really just want every second, and you want her to be there forever. But knowing that wasn't possible, I just wanted her to not be suffering anymore.
Coming up, Liz tells us how hard it was for her and Jay to decide what to do next after Alex passed away. She'll tell us what Alex's Lemonade Stand does today, which is a lot. And we'll also talk a little bit about how Philly has helped along the way. Stay tuned. This episode is brought to you by Leave It, the lockbox that allows you to finally get packages delivered to your home, even when you're not there. Simply place the box outside of your house, add your 4-digit combination, and that's it. No more annoying pink slips on your door, no more shipping your packages to your office, no more letting the delivery drivers into your home. But really, who's doing that anyway? This product will launch this summer, but if you head over to leave.it now, that's leav.it, you'll get priority access and be the first to know when it's available. Oh, and you'll get free shipping. So join up now so you can stop being sorry that they missed you. Welcome back to Philly Who. I'm your host, Kevin Schmidlin, and we just heard from Liz Scott the story of her daughter Alex, who was diagnosed with cancer before she even turned 1. But shortly after turning 8, she had raised over $1 million. I still can't get over that, an 8-year-old. $1 million to fight childhood cancer. Alex would pass away just a few days after reaching her goal of $1 million, but since then, Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation has raised over 150 times that, so it's clear that Alex's legacy will live on forever. But the thing is, right after Alex's passing, when Jay and Liz had to decide whether or not to continue her efforts, they weren't really sure if they should.
At the point where she died and she had reached her $1 million goal, I would guess, looking back on it, first of all, it probably wasn't top of my mind. But I think we thought the lemonade stand would go away naturally. I mean, she was the face. She was the driver of it. It wasn't our stand to continue at that point in my mind. But thankfully, because of the amazing generosity of the people of this world, who continued to send letters and send emails saying things like, we're going to keep doing this every year. We're going to continue what Alex started. You know, Alex's life showed us that we can make a difference for this disease. I think what got me the most was emails from other parents of children with cancer saying, we are so grateful to Alex for giving the opportunity to change this for our kids. And I could just think of Alex saying, you know, that is so selfish. Because at that point, we had thought about maybe continuing it, but I just thought it would be too hard. It would be too hard without her. I didn't know if we could do it without her. There were just so many doubts, and we were grieving, and we had the 3 other boys that needed us. But those families really got to me. And I thought of Alex saying, you know, that is so selfish. You know, everything she did in her life to bring attention to this and to raise $1 million and to get that momentum going, for us to turn our backs and say, this is too hard. You know, we can't do this. Seemed like it wouldn't be fair to her, but it wouldn't be fair to the other kids just like her, you know, who maybe would have a chance to be cured that she didn't have. So we decided just to go for it and start the foundation and see what we could do. We really didn't know what we could do, but we thought we would certainly give it a try.
So at that point, you decided to give it a try to continue her efforts. Did you think that it would become as big as it is today?
We absolutely did not. We didn't think, I think the question was more, would it become as big as it was when Alex was alive, right? In terms of the ability to mobilize people.
So would it stay the size?
Would it stay the size that it was? Never mind grow. That was the big question in my mind. And I would have been okay with it not staying the size personally, in terms of course, because I'm not Alex, right? This was her thing, and she was such an inspiration and driving force behind it. But as a mom living through the loss of a child to cancer, I felt like we had to do something, right? So that drive to make a change was stronger than ever. So the idea of failing those other families really, really bothered me. And it really drove us to push and push and push and do everything we could to grow it and to make sure that what she did was just the beginning and that we were going to keep it going until the end, meaning until there was a cure.
Right. So what made you decide to stay in Philadelphia?
I don't think we ever had a doubt. Well, first of all, you know, our kids had kind of grown up here at that point. Our oldest was 10 and had been in school for several years here. And we have like amazing friends and family in Connecticut. But at the same time, you know, Alex loved this city. We love the city. And honestly, the Philadelphia just took our family in, and took Alex in, took her cause in. And we felt like, you know, we belong here. This is our home, and that there's no other place like it for us.
Yeah. So it's been now, she passed away in 2004?
She passed away in 2004. Yeah.
And it has been 14 years.
Yes, it has.
of the foundation. So it's grown a lot. How much money so far to date has this cause raised?
We are over $150 million raised.
Wow. $150 million, 150 times Alex's original goal, which in itself was almost absurd.
It was absurd to me. And 150 million is absurd to me, but it's done. It's happened. So we're lucky for that.
So throughout this time, Alex, through her efforts, has raised $1 million. Up until that point, where was that money going? Was it one doctor, one hospital?
Until 2002 or so, I don't remember the exact year. I would say she was about 6 years old. We first gave it to her hospital in Connecticut when we had the stand in Connecticut Children's Medical Center. And then once we moved to Philly, we were giving it all to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia for neuroblastoma research. And when she was about 6 years old, she would get letters from all over. It was crazy. Like, she would get letters that would say, "The Lemonade Girl, Pennsylvania," and they would show up at our house. So we would get these checks. And one day we got a few checks in the mail and we were opening them. And she said, "What are we doing with all this money?" And I said, "Alex, you know what we're doing with the money." And she said, "No, I mean, what are we doing with it?" I said, "We're giving it to the hospital." And she, again, was pushing, like, what are they doing with it? And I was really pleased to tell her they're using it for neuroblastoma research at the Children's Hospital, at your hospital. And she started shaking her head. And I said, "What is the matter?" She said, "That is so selfish." And even then, I was about to say, "I don't care," because in my mind, maybe there was a way we were going to find a cure for her. And she said, before I could get the words out, all kids want their tumors to go away. That's what she called her cancer. So she said, all kids want their tumors to go away. We should be giving money to all different hospitals for all kinds of kids' cancer. And I remember just, I had this lump in my throat because I knew she was right. And I also knew that it wasn't about her. It wasn't about curing her. It was about really helping other kids and giving them the chance that she would never have. So that was another big moment because it set the vision, quite honestly, for the foundation today. And so right then, the last couple of years of her life, when she was raising all this money, we were giving it to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, but we were also giving it to other hospitals. We started contacting researchers. We were particularly interested, and Alex was in some of those calls and in some of the meetings, in what they couldn't get funded, right? So, like, what's the problem? We've been doing this for years, and we see kids go on waiting lists for trials. And they said, we have the kids, as you know, and sometimes we even have the drugs, but the process of getting through the clinical trials is really cumbersome. So that's an example of a gap that we started filling. Infrastructure to run clinical trials, which had never occurred to me. No one's paying for these. No one is paying for that. So we started asking those questions, and we've continued through the years, thanks to her vision, and saying, like, no, this is for all kids, all hospitals. What can't you get funded? What are the gaps? What's stopping you from moving forward quickly with your research? And that's how we've developed the grant program, from her simple statement that all kids want their tumors to go away.
A 6-year-old to have such a profound perspective, to be able to recognize a cause that is greater than oneself at 6 years old, and to be in meetings deciding what's getting funded. That's just absolutely remarkable. So I think one thing that really strikes me about Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation, or ALSF, is that not only does it go to fund, specific, cures, research, the scientific research, that kind of thing, but it also focuses a lot on the whole experience of pediatric cancer. So, what the families go through, traveling to get care, the siblings you mentioned before. I think I heard you in an interview once say that it had been discovered that the siblings have larger negative psychological effects long-term than the actual survivors of childhood cancer. So how have you and Jay been able to identify those gaps?
So research is our primary function, as you said. And we fund everything from early science all the way through to first in children clinical trials. And what's interesting was when we first started, especially right after Alex died, I didn't want to hear about possibly funding anything if it wasn't something that was research that was going to lead to a cure. And then over the years, what we realized was, first of all, the first family services program we created was the Travel for Care program. And that was, I think, in 2007 or 2008. And what happened was a researcher came to us and said, this is great. You guys are increasing the number of clinical trials. But I have to tell you, I have a lot of families who can't get here for the clinical trials. So there's 21, maybe 22 centers that can do phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials in the country. And getting to those centers for a lot of the families means they have to travel. If they're not flying, they're driving like we did, hundreds of miles potentially. And not everybody can afford that. I mean, we could barely afford it, but we had credit. Not every family has credit. So that broke my heart because I thought we're creating a system that will allow families who have the means to get there to have a chance for their children to survive. So we started the Travel for Care program, and that program has grown, still growing. Compared to what we spend on research, it's a relatively small part of our budget. We'll probably spend about $500,000 this year on travel for families. The impact it has, we're able to help hundreds and hundreds of families through gas cards, airfare, sometimes a hotel if there's no Ron McDonald House available. And it is a difference maker for those families. The average family that we assist with that program last year had an income of $30,000 for the family. And then you throw a childhood cancer diagnosis on top of that, which is financially devastating anyways. And you have a real financial crisis for the family. So the thought that they have to drive 60 miles each way back and forth to the hospital is literally not doable sometimes. So we don't even provide a reimbursement program. We pay upfront.
Wow.
They get a gas card that they can replenish with us. We will book the airfare for them. We will call the hotel and put a credit card down for them. And it has allowed families to have access to treatments that literally would have been out of reach for them.
Incredible.
It is. And, you'd think we would have seen that as parents who did that ourselves. But it took a researcher coming to us and saying, his thought was, is it okay if I use some of my grant to help these families? And of course we said yes, but it got us thinking that we need to do something bigger beyond that one institution. Yeah.
What good is the cure if nobody can get to it?
Exactly. And then our sibling program, that actually, we're very grateful that it came to us from another mom. She had started Super Sibs because her son, she had 2 sons, one had cancer and one didn't. The one who didn't have cancer was really struggling. And she could find literally no resources to support him. And she started this organization dedicated to siblings of children with cancer. And she grew it and she did a beautiful job with it for many, many years. And she was at a point in her life where she needed to make a move for personal reasons. And she wanted to make sure the program continued. So she came to us and said, would you guys think about taking this over? And even though, at first look, you think, well, they're supposed to be curing cancer. What does it have to do with siblings? We never want that sort of to be boxed in because honestly, it's the right thing to do. It's a gap, right? And if that program went away, nobody would be supporting siblings of children with cancer. And the more we learned about the detrimental effects that cancer diagnosis can have on siblings, the more we knew we had to take on this program. And it's pretty straightforward. The siblings get referred usually or hopefully at pretty close to when their sibling is diagnosed. And then for 2 years, we send them mailings every couple months. Age appropriate, words of encouragement, words of empowerment, and coping. So letting them know that whatever they're feeling, it's okay, teaching them ways to express their feelings. And really importantly, the parents get information about what the siblings are going through, even if they look okay, because most of the time they're going to tell you, I'm fine. But inside, there's a lot going on there, understandably.
So through all these years of growing the foundation, how has Philadelphia proper played a role in its growth?
I've thought about that before because, I always say that like there was this like Alex magic, right? And sometimes I still feel like it's working.
Yeah.
But I do often think that that magic wouldn't have happened to the extent it did if we weren't in Philadelphia. Just the community and just the generosity and the way that they embraced her story can continue to is pretty amazing. Yeah. And I'm not sure it could have happened somewhere else to the extent it did. I mean, there were so many things. So the community embraced her story, and it's a philanthropic community on top of that. And then the media embraced her story. And let's face it, Philadelphia is a major media market. So it got picked up in other markets, and it just snowballed from there. So I think it was a huge factor in what has happened. Right. And Philadelphia is still a huge part of what we do. We have so many events here, and so many of our supporters are in this area.
So how Philadelphia's gone through a lot of change in the past 17 years. How have you seen it changed from your perspective?
I feel like it's changed. It hasn't changed that much for me.
Okay.
I feel like the people have always been great people. And I don't think that was different in 2001.
Yeah.
But I certainly think it's become maybe cooler. There's like more restaurants and that sort of thing. But in general, I think it's the people that make the city. And I think the people have been incredible since the day we moved here.
Yeah. It doesn't take trendy rooftop bars to have a great community, right?
Yes, you're right. That's exactly right. So to me, that's the same. That's stayed the same. It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The heart of the city hasn't changed.
If you were to send a message today to yourself while going, through the ups and downs of Alex's time, would you?
Oh, I have never been asked that before. I think I would.
And what would you say?
I would say you can do it. You can get through it. Because, knowing what was coming, knowing that she probably wasn't going to survive was terrifying. And I was worried that I still worry about it, that I wouldn't be able to be the mom I needed to be. I wouldn't be able to be the person I needed to be to get her through that and to get my family, to get my other children through it. And I was terrified of the idea that I even had to go through that. I didn't think I could do it. And I did it. Did I do the best job I could do? I don't know. I did what I thought was the best I could do at the time. Yeah. But I would tell myself that you'll get through it. And then myself would probably tell me to shut up.
Right. So for all you podcast listeners out there, I'm totally stealing this question from Tim Ferriss. Just going to give credit where it's due. If you had the opportunity, if you were given a billboard that all Philadelphians would see, what would you put on it?
Thank you. That's easy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. We feel lucky, despite everything. We feel like we've been blessed in so many ways. And I think Philadelphia is right up there with the reasons why we have been. Absolutely.
For those listening to the podcast who may not already be involved with Alex's Lemonade Stand, who want to be involved, what would you tell them to do?
We have so many ways to be involved now. So we have lemonade stands, but we have, especially in Philly, we have events all throughout the year. I would recommend they go to our website.
Okay.
Because in our Get Involved page, there's so many ways. We're always looking for volunteers. We're always looking for donors. We really like people to engage, whether it's with your family doing a lemonade stand, doing our September event, which is a 30-day, logging miles challenge for childhood cancer awareness, to businesses getting involved. Businesses are the backbone of what we do here. It's like almost half our revenue comes from our business partners and supporters. So there's so many ways to get involved.
Okay. What's the website?
alexslemonade.org.
alexslemonade.org.
Yep.
Great. Any For the listeners out there, any parting thoughts? Anything that you would like them to consider, to do, to take away?
I think, the biggest takeaway from Alex's life, the foundation is amazing. And it's her legacy. But there's this whole other side to her as a person that I've learned a lot from, and I think other people can learn from. And I'll give you an example. At the end of her life, she was very, very sick, obviously. And it was a struggle. It was a real struggle. And she didn't want to stay overnight in the hospital. So we were really determined to keep her at home. But that meant we went to the hospital every single day, all day. And then we'd come home at night. But there were multiple times where that wasn't enough. And we would have to go back to the hospital in the middle of the night for some reason. This was one of those nights. It was actually the third night in, say, a week that this happened. So it was 1 a.m. She was feeling terribly. She was having a terrible time. My husband put her in the car to go to the emergency room. And he turned around and he said, "I'm so sorry for everything." Because it was heartbreaking to see what she was going through. And she didn't hesitate for 1 second to say, "If there's one thing you should know about me by now, I'm happy for what I have, not unhappy for what I don't have."
Wow.
And at that moment, at the time it was really profound. In fact, he called me when he got to the hospital, which that was like pre-texting, so he called, and usually that would mean an emergency. And he just called because he wanted to share that with me. And I thought it was incredible, but I didn't even appreciate just how incredible it was until months, probably years later, because she suffered a lot and her life was not easy. And she was having, one of the worst days. But to be able to say that at that moment when your future is not even possible, right? It's not going to get better. It was literally, we couldn't tell her it was going to get better. She could have screamed and swore and said, "I hate you, I hate this, I hate my life." And instead she said, "I'm happy for what I have." So I think it tells you a lot about how your attitude, which isn't even a strong enough word, the way you feel and the way you live your life can really make incredible things possible, like she did in her life. And I'm very grateful to her for that, because even without the lemonade stand and the work that's come from it, that alone is just an incredible gift to me as her mom and as someone who's had some pretty tough days since, to be able to think back to that and think, I should be happy for what I have. We should all be happy for what we have.
For more on Alex, Liz, and Alex's lemonade stand, head over to podphillyhoo.com/lemonade. You can follow Alex's Lemonade Stand on social media at Alex's Lemonade. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at podphillyhoo. Special thanks to Meade Morrison, Chris Villanueva, Aaron Houston, and Jacob Jordan. Music by Lee Rosevere. And shout out to Lauren Carhart for the awesome podcast artwork. For Philly Who, my name is Kevin Schmidlin. We'll see you next week.